My name is Elara Vance. I'm 34 years old, a freelance archival historian by trade, and until last Tuesday, I was the black sheep of a family that prided itself on being picture perfect. My work involves digging through dusty letters and brittle deeds, piecing together the stories of people who thought their lives were ordinary. I have a knack for finding what others overlook, for reading between the lines of the past. It's a skill that, as I've recently learned, can be more of a curse than a blessing when turned toward your own bloodline. The call came on a bleak, sleet-driven afternoon in late November, a week before Thanksgiving. It was my older brother, Julian, his voice polished and practiced, like a news anchor delivering a prepared statement. "Elara, hi. I have some logistical news about the house. The family home. We need to talk. Our childhood home. A sprawling, gingerbread-trimmed Victorian on the outskirts of a sleepy New England town. A place that smelled of pine polish, old books, and my mother's rosemary roast chicken every Sunday. It was the anchor of our family, the physical manifestation of our shared history. Even though we'd all scattered to the winds years ago, I hadn't been back in over a year, my visits becoming less frequent as the polite, smiling interrogations about my career path, and lack of a family of my own, grew more barbed. I was the one who didn't fit the mold, the academic, the spinster, the one who lived in a cramped apartment above a bookstore and talked to ghosts for a living. "What about it?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Well, the market's robust," Julian said, avoiding. "We've had an offer, a very good one, from a developer. It's a cash deal, no contingencies. It would solve a lot of financial complexities for everyone." Complexities, that was Julian's favorite word. Our parents, now in their late 60s, had quietly mismanaged their finances for years. The family home was a white elephant, a money pit of property taxes, heating bills, and endless repairs. The offer was a siren song of easy solvency, but it was the how that caught my attention. "Who's we, Julian? Since when is this a group decision?" A pause, then the sigh he used when I was being difficult. "Mom, Dad, and me. We've been discussing options. You were on your research trip in Maine. We thought it best to wait until you were back to formally present the proposal." Proposal, the word sat in my gut like a stone. Present it to me, or tell me it's already done. Another sigh. "Elara, it's not like that. We need to sign some papers, a few documents to transfer the title. It's a formality, really. We can do it over Zoom, or I can send a courier." The ice in my veins wasn't from the sleet outside. It was from the realization that I was being asked to sign away, the only physical place I'd ever truly belonged. And I hadn't even been consulted in any meaningful way. My anger, cold and sharp, cut through the hurt. "I want to see the deed, the current one, and the sales contract. Send them to me, all of them. There's really no need to get legal. Send them." My tone left no room for argument. He did. The envelope arrived via overnight mail the next day. Inside were 2 documents, a preliminary sales agreement with a developer named Havenwood Properties, and a single sheet of paper that looked like a standard form, a request for conveyancing instructions from a local law firm, Henderson and Shaw. My eyes scanned the sales agreement first. It was boilerplate, listing the property address, the seller as the estate of Margaret and Robert Vance, and the buyer, standard. Then I turned to the conveyancing form. It was a cover sheet, a checklist for the law firm to begin the title search and transfer. At the top, in a bold pre-printed field, was sellers, the individuals, adjoint tenants, with tenants in common, state of deceased. And next to it, in neat, typed block letters that I knew as well as my own handwriting, was seller, Margaret Vance, Robert Vance, Julian Vance, and Elara Vance. A cold electric shock shot up my spine. And Elara Vance. My name was there, but it was wrong. It was a lie so fundamental it made my vision blur. Because the name on the original deed, the deed my grandfather had signed over to his children in the 1970s, the deed that had been recorded in the county registry for 50 years, was not Elara Vance. It was Eleanor Vance, a phantom sister, a ghost in the title. I was Elara, always had been. My parents had chosen the name Elara, a star in some forgotten myth, for their second child. There was no Eleanor. I didn't have a sister. I was an only daughter, with 2 older brothers, Julian and Marcus. My hands began to shake. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't a simple error. This was a meticulously constructed fiction. A name that had been typed, probably on a computer, probably by Julian or our father, to create a legal entity that did not exist. Eleanor Vance, who was she? Why was she on this document? The first irrational thought was that my family had gone mad, that some shared delusion had taken hold. But the typed letters were crisp, official. This was a deliberate act. I called Julian immediately. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight. Elara, look, I know you're upset, but it's just a clerical. Who is Eleanor Vance? I cut him off, my voice eerily calm. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that stretched for 5 full seconds. What are you talking about? The conveyancing form, the seller field. It says Margaret Robert Julian and Eleanor Vance. My name is Elara, Elara. Who did you put on the form? Another silence, longer this time. I could hear the distant sound of his breathing, then a muffled, sharp exchange in the background. My parents' voices, hushed and urgent. Julian came back on, his tone shifting from dismissive to something harder, more brittle. Elara, you're mistaken. You're stressed. It's been a long time since you've been involved in the family business. You probably just misread it. It's Eleanor. That's your name. It's always been your name. The world tilted. The walls of my apartment seemed to pulse. That's a lie. My name is Elara. You know that. Mom and Dad named me Elara. No, sweetheart, he said, and the patronizing endearment was a slap. It's Eleanor. Don't you remember? You had that phase in high school where you wanted to be called Elara. You thought it sounded more mysterious. We all went along with it. It was a quirk. But your legal name, the name on your birth certificate, is Eleanor. We went over this with you when you turned 18. You signed the paperwork to change it to Elara for everyday use, but legally, you're Eleanor. A wall of sound built in my ears. My 18th birthday. The day I'd legally changed my name from the one I hated, the old-fashioned, clunky Eleanor, to the lyrical Elara. I remembered the trip to the courthouse with my best friend. The judge who'd smiled and said, "A star, how lovely." I remembered the new driver's license, the feeling of shedding a skin. But Julian was saying I'd changed from Elara to Eleanor, that I'd adopted a quirk and the family had humored me, that my legal name was Eleanor and Elara was the fiction. It was a perfect, horrifying inversion of the truth, and it was being sold to me by my own brother, with what sounded like my parents' collusion in the background. That's not true, I whispered. It is, Julian insisted, his voice gaining confidence, rallying. Look, this is all very triggering for you. I get it. The house, the memories. But the sale is happening. It's the best thing for everyone. The developer is ready to move. We just need you, Eleanor, to sign the paperwork. Acknowledging you've been informed and consent to the sale. It's a formality. Once it's done, we can all move on. There's a generous equal split for everyone, including you. Equal split for everyone, including you. The phrase was a velvet-lined cage. They were trying to buy my silence, my complicity, with a share of the profits from a house I was supposedly part owner of, under a name that wasn't mine. I want to see the original deed, I said, the historian in me taking over, the one who deals in primary sources. The one from 1972, the one recorded. In book 1485, page 217, I want to see the original signature of my grandfather. A sharp intake of breath. That's in the safe deposit box at the bank. It's just paperwork, Elara. Eleanor, he corrected automatically, a chilling slip. And it's not necessary. The title company has already done a preliminary search. Everything is in order. Then you won't mind if I verify it myself. There's really no need to drag up the past like this, he said, and I could hear the first threads of panic in his voice. It's just a house. It's not worth this breakdown. It's my name, I said, and the words were a rock. And it's my history. I'll be in town tomorrow. I'm coming to the house, and I'm going to that bank. I hung up. My hands were ice cold. I stared at the 2 documents on my kitchen table. The sales agreement, with its promise of a clean break, and the conveyancing form, with its monstrous, fictional Eleanor Vance. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, connecting dots that formed a picture more terrifying than any ghost story I'd ever researched. Why go to all this trouble? Why create a phantom co-owner? The simplest answer was the most sinister: to force a sale. If I, Elara, refused to sign, the sale could be held up. But if the legal documents, even preliminary ones, listed an Eleanor Vance who was difficult to locate or disputed, it created a cloud on the title. It made the sale riskier for the developer, potentially killing the deal or allowing my family to negotiate from a position of greater weakness, perhaps accepting a lower offer. They were manufacturing a legal obstacle to pressure me or to marginalize me. But why not just forge my signature? Why create a whole new person? Because a forged signature could be detected. A phantom person, if unchallenged, was a ghost in the machine. Impossible to disprove without a meticulous, costly legal battle that would eat into the profits. They were betting I wouldn't fight, that I'd be confused, gaslit, and ultimately bribed into silence. The next morning I drove to my hometown. The streets were dusted with the first snow of the season. The Christmas lights just beginning to appear in windows, a cruel contrast to the cold dread in my chest. The family home stood as it always had, a monument to a past that now felt alien and hostile. I didn't go inside. I went straight to the local branch of First National Bank. The safe deposit box key I knew was in my mother's jewelry box. I had a copy made years ago for emergency purposes that I'd never used. I presented it to the bank manager, a man named Mr. Ellery who had known me since I was a child. He looked pained. Elara, Eleanor, I'm sorry, which is it today? It's Elara, and I need to access box 117, please. My mother has given me permission. He hesitated, then with a sigh led me to the vault. The box was small, filled with the expected detritus of generations. My grandfather's pocket watch, some war medals, stock certificates from defunct companies, and a thick, manila envelope marked Vance Property Deed and Survey. My hands trembled as I opened it. There it was, the original deed, the heavy parchment-like paper, the elegant flowing script of the 1972 recorder, and the grantor, Cyrus and Beatrice Vance. To their children, Margaret, Robert, and Julian Vance. My breath hitched. It listed Margaret, Robert, and Julian. 3 names, not 4. No Eleanor, no Elara. Just the 3 siblings I knew. My mother, my uncle Julian, my father's brother, and my father Robert. But wait, my father's brother was named Julian. My brother was named Julian. The deed listed Julian Vance. Which Julian? My father's brother or my brother? The deed was from 1972. My brother, Julian, was born in 1965. He would have been 7 years old. A 7-year-old cannot own property. This was the deed to my father's share, left to him and his brother. The mystery of Eleanor was still there, but a new, deeper confusion settled in. The deed didn't mention my generation at all. It was from one generation to the next. So where did the Elara Vance on the modern conveyancing form come from? And why did it feel like I was being erased from a story that was supposed to be mine? I took photos of the deed with my phone, my mind racing. The bank manager looked at me with a mixture of pity and unease. Everything all right, Elara? Fine, I said, my voice a stranger's, just tying up some loose ends. My next stop was the county recorder's office. The old, musty building smelled of dust and bureaucracy. I asked for the clerk who handled historical documents, an elderly woman named Agnes who remembered my grandfather. Agnes, I need to see the chain of title for 24 Sycamore Lane, I said, using the formal address. She led me to a back room lined with towering, groaning shelves of leather-bound books. She pulled down a heavy volume marked Grantor-Grantee Index. Voller 47, her finger traced the lines. Sycamore Lane. Vance, here it is. Cyrus Vance to Margaret, Robert, and Julian Vance. 1972. Then, Robert Vance to Robert Vance and Elara Vance, 1998. I stared at her. What? Repeat that. She squinted at the microfilm reader screen she'd moved to. Robert Vance to Robert Vance and Elara Vance. Quitclaim deed. Filed 1998. Then, Margaret Vance to Margaret, Robert, Julian, and Elara Vance. 2005, another quitclaim. Looks like your grandfather left his share to your dad. And then your dad added you to the title later. My father. In 1998, I would have been 8 years old. In 2005, I would have been 15. My father had, at some point, legally added an Elara Vance to the title of the family home. But my name was Elara. I was Elara. So why did the modern documents list an Eleanor, unless the Elara Vance on those old deeds was a different person? A different me, or a different her. The gaslighting wasn't just about the present. It was about the past. They were trying to overwrite decades of history, to claim that the Elara Vance who existed on paper was a fiction, a phase, a quirk. But here was physical. County-recorded evidence that an Elara Vance had been on the title since 1998. My father had put her there. Why would he do that? And who was she? I left the recorder's office feeling unmoored. The ground beneath my identity had cracked open. I drove back to the family home, my childhood sanctuary, now a crime scene of memory. I let myself in with my old key. The air was still and cold. The furniture was draped in sheets, the portraits on the walls looking down at me with unfamiliar eyes. I walked through the rooms, each one a diorama of a past that felt increasingly like someone else's memories. The library where my father taught me to read, the kitchen where my mother baked pies, the staircase where I'd sat with my first boyfriend, whispering secrets. And in the hall closet, Under a stack of old board games and winter coats, I found it. A small cedar box I hadn't opened since I was a teenager. Inside, beneath my christening gown and a lock of my baby hair, was a manila folder. My birth certificate, my social security card, and a single sheet of paper, typed on my father's old Selectric typewriter, dated the day after my 18th birthday. It was a letter addressed to the county registrar. It stated that Eleanor Vance, henceforth known as Elara Vance, was changing her name for all legal and personal purposes, and requested that all relevant documents be amended. It was signed by my father, as my legal guardian, and by me, with my shaky adolescent signature. I had signed that paper. I had changed my name from Eleanor to Elara. The legal process was real. I had a new driver's license, a new passport. I was Elara, but the deed from 1998, the one that added Elara Vance to the title, predated my name change by 2 years. It was a paradox, a temporal knot, unless the Elara Vance on the 1998 deed was the person I was before I changed my name, the person I was supposedly named at birth, Eleanor. My head spun. The only way this made sense was if my entire life was a lie. If I was not Elara Vance, freelance historian, daughter of Robert and Margaret, sister to Julian and Marcus. If I was Eleanor Vance, a girl who, for reasons unknown, had been given a different name at birth, who had later, at 13 or 14, insisted on being called Elara, and at 18 had legally changed it back. A girl whose father had added her to the title under her birth name, Eleanor, but who now, in the present, was being told her birth name was Eleanor and her chosen name was a phase. It was insane. It was impossible. But the documents were here. The paper trail was here. And my family, my own brother and parents, were insisting on this alternate version of reality with a desperate, coordinated fervor. I sank to the floor, the cedar box open beside me, the cold from the hardwood seeping through my clothes. I was a historian. I dealt in facts, in ink on parchment, in signatures and dates. The facts were screaming at me, but they made no sense. The emotional truth of my life, the name Elara, the feeling of it being mine, was being systematically dismantled by a paper trail that seemed to prove the opposite. What was the truth? And more importantly, who had the power to construct such an elaborate, pervasive lie? And why? The answer, when it came, was hidden not in the documents, but in the one place I hadn't looked, the attic. The attic of the Victorian was a cavern of forgotten things, a physical subconscious of the family. I climbed the pull-down ladder. The air thick with dust and the smell of cedar and decay. I played the beam of my phone's flashlight over trunks. Old furniture, stacks of National Geographics. And then I saw it. Tucked behind a broken rocking horse and a dressmaker's dummy, a small water-stained suitcase of a type I hadn't seen before. It was unlocked. Inside, neatly folded, were baby clothes, a tiny hand-knit pink sweater, a rattle, and a thick, leather-bound baby book, its cover embossed with baby's first year. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely open it. The first page had a place for a name, a date, a time, a weight. It was filled out in my mother's elegant script. Name, Eleanor Grace Vance. Date, October 26, 1986. Time 3:42 am. Weight, 7 lbs 2 Aussie. Below, in the same script but pressed harder, as if written in anger or grief. Given name at birth, Eleanor. Legal name changed to Elara by request of child, age 13. Do not forget. Do not forgive. I had a sister, an identical twin, Eleanor. She had died. The date on the page was my birthday. But it was also her birthday. We were twins, and I had survived. I was Elara, the name I had fought for. The name I had worn like a shield. Was the name I had been given at birth. The name Eleanor was the ghost, the phantom on the title, the one they were trying to resurrect, to claim as the true owner, the true heir, to force the sale of the house that held the memory of the child who had died. The pieces crashed together with horrifying clarity. My parents, devastated by the loss of one twin, had poured all their love and grief into the surviving child, the one they called Elara. But the legal and bureaucratic world, the county recorder, the bank, knew the child as Eleanor. The birth certificate, the social security card, the early deeds, they all bore the name Eleanor. My father, in a gesture of love or perhaps guilt, had added Elara Vance to the title in 1998, using the name I knew myself by, the name of the living daughter. But as time passed, as the grief faded and the financial burdens grew, they saw an opportunity. They could sell the house, but they needed the consent of all owners. The legal owner was Eleanor Vance, the living. Breathing Eleanor Vance was right there, in the attic in a suitcase. A ghost they could summon with a few keystrokes, a typed name on a form. They could claim I was the imposter, the one who had stolen my sister's name, the one who was mentally unstable, clinging to a fantasy. They could have me declared incompetent, or simply bully me into submission with the weight of official paperwork that said, I was Eleanor. The sale wasn't about money. It was about erasing the memory of the child they lost. It was about selling the house that held her ghost. And they needed the ghost's signature to do it. So they created a ghost with a keyboard, and they tried to convince the living one to sign it away. I sat in the dusty attic, the baby book in my lap, the cold truth settling into my bones. I was Elara. I had always been Elara, but I was also Eleanor. I was the survivor, and I was the ghost they were trying to sell. I didn't go back to the main house. I went to a hotel, then to a lawyer, a fierce, sharp-eyed woman named Denise who specialized in estate litigation and, as it turned out, cases of familial gaslighting. I laid out my evidence, the birth certificate, the baby book, the deeds, the conveyancing form, the letter from my father. I told her everything. She listened, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. They're trying to sell a sister who never lived as an adult, she said, her voice grim. They're trying to sell a legal phantom. And they're using you, the real person, to authenticate the phantom. It's a particularly cruel form of identity theft. She filed for a temporary injunction, preventing the sale. She subpoenaed the developer, the law firm Henderson and Shaw, and my parents and brother for depositions. The story exploded. The local paper, then the regional news, picked it up. Family tries to sell house using dead twins' identity, the headlines blared. The developer backed out, his cash deal evaporating in the light of scandal. The confrontation in Denise's office was a quiet, terrible thing. My parents came, aged a decade in a week, their faces etched with shame and a desperate, fading defiance. Julian looked like a man who had built a house of cards in a hurricane. My father, Robert, sat slumped, his eyes on the floor. We just wanted to be done with it, my mother whispered, her voice cracking. The house. It was too much. The memories, we couldn't bear it. And the debts, the taxes. We thought if we could just sell, we could start over, somewhere new, without the ghost. So you tried to sell the ghost, I said, my voice flat. You tried to sell me, or the idea of me, the Eleanor you lost. You were always Elara to us, my father said, finally looking at me. His eyes red-rimmed. After we lost her, we couldn't say the name Eleanor again. It was forbidden. You asked to be called Elara, and it was a relief. But the world still knew you as Eleanor. The paperwork, it was a mess. We tried to fix it, but it was too complicated. And then when the developer came, it seemed like an answer. We could fix it all. We could make the phantom real, just on paper, and sell the past. We were going to give you your share, Elara. We were going to make it right for you. By erasing her, I said, gesturing to the birth certificate on Denise's desk. By selling the only place she ever lived. You were going to sell her memory for a pile of cash. Julian shifted. It wasn't like that. It was just business. We needed the money. The house was a millstone. We thought we could streamline the process. By committing fraud, Denise stated, not a question. The legal battle was long and ugly. My parents and brother were charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. My parents were beneficiaries of the estate, but my father was also a defendant. The case never went to trial. A plea deal was struck. They surrendered their shares of the house to me, and the developer's lawsuit was settled out of court. My parents moved to Florida, a cold, silent exodus. Julian's law license was suspended. Marcus, my other brother, who had been largely absent from the scheme, kept his distance, shattered by the family's implosion. I inherited the house I had loved, the house that was now a museum of a tragedy I had never fully understood. I spent months sorting through its contents, each object a relic. I kept my sister's baby book on the mantelpiece. I kept the cedar box with my own childhood things beside it. I was Elara, but I was also the keeper of Eleanor's memory. I had survived and she had not. The house was now a testament to both of us. I never sold it. I had the deed changed, legally to reflect the truth. Elara Vance, sole owner. I opened the door to the attic, letting light in. I had the nursery, the room that had been prepared for twins but used by only one, repainted. I put a desk by the window, where I could work on my histories, on the stories of other families, other secrets. Sometimes on a quiet winter night, I would sit in the dark living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling, and I would feel a presence, not frightening but peaceful, an echo of a coo, a whisper of a giggle that never was. I would raise a glass of wine, a Christmas Eve tradition my mother had started, and toast the two daughters who had lived in this house. One who had grown up and learned to bear the weight of a stolen name and a stolen history, and one who had never had the chance to grow up at all. The house was no longer a millstone. It was an anchor, a complicated, painful, beautiful anchor. And I, Elara Vance, was finally truly home. The story you've just heard is one of identity, of memory, and of the dark places grief can take a family. It's a reminder that the most dangerous secrets aren't always hidden in shadows. Sometimes they're typed neatly on official forms, waiting for someone with the patience to read between the lines. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of a family's hidden past, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the mysteries that bind us. And hey, if you've ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. From all of us here, wishing you a holiday season filled with light and a new year of uncovering your own truths.